Hey there and welcome to today's episode of Piano TV. Today we are going to do a grade 4 level tutorial. It's going to be an etude. It's in the RCM syllabus, so it's something that if you have the Celebration Series books, it's in the newest edition, level 4. And we're going to be taking a look at something called the Etude in E minor by Carl Loeschhorn. Now, this might not seem exciting by title. When you hear a title like Etude in E minor, it sounds a little bit bland, but this particular exercise has a lot of really good things to develop. I really like this piece. This one didn't make the cut for the grade 4 class that I'm going to be teaching in the fall, or planning to teach, but it I think is a piece that's well worth learning for anyone who wants to experiment with some early intermediate level repertoire. This is the kind of piece that, unless you are particularly gifted, I wouldn't give it a go until you've been playing piano for probably at least 4 years or so. The reasons I like this piece so much are multifold. So for starters, it's a really good piece to practice lightly switching off from one finger to the next without accidentally dragging the fingers. So you're going to be making a lot of broken chord patterns. One finger quickly passes to the next. And it's really tough to keep the fingers light enough that they don't create drag. And we'll talk about all of this on the keyboard. Another thing I like is it's a good theory study. Everything is in chord shapes. So there's a good opportunity to learn about different types of chords and being able to identify different types of chords. So we're going to use it as a little bit of a theoretical study. But one of the main reasons I really like this piece is because it serves as an excellent practice for sight reading. So if sight reading is a struggle for you, if you're the kind of person who always has to look at your hands while you're playing, or who always has to memorize what's on the page before you can figure out how to play it, this is not a good piece for that. So this one has too many changes in the chords for it to be easily memorized. This one, I think for a lot of people, isn't one that just accidentally gets memorized. It would have to be pretty deliberately memorized, unless you're particularly adept in that way. And as a result, being able to sight read effectively is really important. This is a good piece to practice staring at the sheet and trying not to look at your hands at all. And it's challenging to do that. You might even need to steal a couple glances, but for the most part, the broken chord patterns are just moving in small steps, but they do move, and sometimes there's occasional leaps. And to see if you can kind of, from a tactile perspective, feel your way through those changes without having to glance down at your hands, which is only going to slow you down, is part of the challenge of this piece and why I think it's such a good etude. Not looking at your hands is, I guess, possible if you're playing this really slow, like 50 or 60 beats per minute. Not that that's that slow, but if you're trying to play it at speed, it's impossible. You're not going to be able to do this. You'll get whiplash just looking back and forth. And again, it's not a piece that it would be a grind to memorize it in order to stare at your hands. So take advantage of the sort of built-in exercise of training your tactile memory, the feel of the keys, being able to find where the keys are. And yeah, let's get started. Okay, before we go to the keyboard and I show you how this sounds, let's just break down a few basic components of this piece so you know what you're watching for and what you're listening for. So Etude in E minor is already giving us a lot of good information. We can look at the key signature, see that 1 sharp, and immediately know that this is in the key of E minor because of that. Now, what we see here is the whole piece is built on these triplet patterns. So we're in common time, 4/4, so we're counting in fours. Da, 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 da. Our flow is going to be in threes, so triple it, triple it. So the whole piece is going to have, it's almost going to feel a little bit like 6/8 time, but it's 4/4 triplets. It sort of amounts to a pretty similar vibe. So just to get a sense of what's going on with the music, we're going to do a harmonic breakdown and analysis. A couple of things I want you to watch for, though, is keeping my eyes. I'm going to be keeping ahead at the keys as I'm playing, and I'm going to make sure that when I'm playing these legato triplet passages, that when I'm trading one finger to the next, no sound is overstaying its welcome. So it's going to be a light legato, not a heavy, draggy legato. And then we'll get into the harmonic analysis when we pop back over to the screen after we play it. So let's go check it out. let's get started with a harmonic analysis on this piece. So what I have on the screen here are the notes of an E natural minor scale from E to E. And this is going to be, we're going to create a little bit of an index or a guide for ourselves as we go through the harmony in this piece. The thing that we're going to be figuring out is what chords are to be expected in this piece, which ones would be the typical tension release chords, and which ones might be a little bit more of a surprise. So in Roman numerals, the ones that we particularly want to look out for are going to be the 1 and the 4 and the major 5. And this is going to manifest as a B major chord or a B7 chord with a, it's going to involve a chord with a D sharp, because that middle note is going to be raised to make it major. We're also going to see other chords than these, but these are the ones to really try to train your eyes on or try to pick out. Now, when you're discerning the chords, it is mostly useful, I think, with this particular piece to look to the left hand. The right hand is sometimes outlining chords and filling in details, but it's mostly more melodic. They both sort of work together, but the left hand is often more chord outliney, less note steppy. There's some great English language for you right there. Okay, so we can see that the first one we're starting with our tonic because we're outlining an E minor chord. Now our next chord here, we have an F sharp, an A, and a B. And there's no D sharp indicated here, but we can kind of infer that these are some of the bones of a B chord. So we're kind of doing a tonic, dominant, tonic motion here. And this is really common in music because it helps to establish the key and really get your ears honed into the E minor sound. We're doing an immediate tonic, dominant, tonic harmony. Then we have one of our little surprises. So not all the chords are going to fit our template. We have an E major chord sitting in there, but we're going to see, okay, here's an A minor chord. Just keeping my eyes peeled for some of those common chords. This one isn't the 1, the 4, or the 5. It's just a regular old D minor, a G major chord. These all fit. You can form a G major chord when you're in the key of E minor. But right now, what I'm really just doing is trying to hone in on the patterns. We have a C major chord here, F sharp diminished chord, which is kind of cool because we're going away from the major minor tonalities here. And then here we go. B, F sharp, and D sharp. This is giving a strong indication of the B major chord. So this is going to give us a strong pulling. And you'll notice that it's often paired up with the dominant. So the dominant almost always sits nearby to the tonic. It either resolves to the tonic or the tonic builds up to the dominant. Those two often come together. So now it looks like we're doing a little bit of a, what would this one be now? So we have a D, an E, and a B. I wonder what that is. That doesn't form into an obvious chord. So I'm going to deconstruct this. I'm just curious to figure it out. If I were to try to separate them all in thirds, we could put E here. There's a blank there, a B here, and then we could fit a D there. What could go in that blank if we're creating a chord based on thirds? E, then the third, then a B, then a D. You can see that is going to be either a G, G natural, G sharp, that kind of thing. Oh, in the right hand, there's a G. That's nice. So what we actually get here is still a tonic harmony. It's still a tonic chord. It's still an E minor, but it's an E minor 7, which is kind of cool. Again, little variations on a theme to make it a little bit more spicy. We've got a C sharp. Let's see. This is A sharp, C sharp, E. So that's going to be an A sharp. We got another diminished chord. That's kind of funky. Doesn't fit the mold. And then you can see again, here's our B, D sharp, F. There's our dominant harmony again. And as we probably are going to expect, it's going to lead us right to the tonic harmony. And then we've got what is essentially structurally a repeat. And this is something to keep in mind when you're learning it as well. So this piece doesn't really have a formal structure, and I think that's one of the reasons it's hard to memorize, but we can see that the sort of the first iteration is from here to here. And then when we get back to measure 9, it's the same as measure 1. It changes really quick though. So we could call this like A1 and A2, let's say, maybe, because they're really similar parts. It's not like we enter a new piece or something like that. We can see A2 perhaps starts exactly the same, but it's the chords change here. We get into some really cool stuff. We get into some G major type harmonies. It temporarily modulates to the relative major. Don't need to worry about that too much, but that's just kind of a cool thing that's going on here. But again, if you're scanning, if you don't know a lot about chords, you can really just scan to see what's what vestiges of E minor you can see buried in the piece. The ones, the fours, the fives. Those are the ones to really pay attention to, and the more trained you get at identifying chords, the more you're going to be able to pinpoint every individual one. Is there a supertonic or a submediant or anything like that going on? The thing about grade 4, and the thing that is really important for me for students to know at a grade 4 level, ideally by the end of the grade 4 level, is how to fairly quickly and easily identify the 1s, 4s, and 5s in many different keys. Now, if you're working with the RCM, that would be keys up to 3 sharps and flats. ABRSM, it's going to be harder. It's going to be 5 flats, 5 sharps. So pretty much all the keys that you're going to care to learn. And that's the reason that I want you to, not only are they the most important chords in most pieces because they anchor the piece and they anchor your ear, but they're the ones that at this level are the ones to really train yourself towards being able to recognize. So I'd encourage you to go through this piece as we've been doing and see if you can find the 1s, the 4s, and the 5s. And there might be some other surprises along the way. All right, let's go back to the keyboard and figure out how to play this. So there's 2 things to talk about with this piece at the keyboard. The first one is being able to keep clean continuity from one note to the next without overlapping the notes, which would sound something like this. And that's when the fingers stay a little sticky. They press down longer than they should. It's almost like you imagine we don't want to do it like a relay race. So if you're thinking about a relay race, you get to the next person, you pass the baton, and then you have to just sort of run a little bit further, and you overlap where the other person begins running. We don't want to do this at all. The second we hit the next tone, we want to stop the previous tone. So we get a connection from one note to the next. The baton is passed, but not an overlap. Okay, and this is really challenging when you're doing it quietly. The vast majority of this piece is played at a quiet tempo or a quiet volume. So there's a precise, fast attack speed with the fingers in order to do this. If you move into the notes slowly, that's when you get a little bit more of that tendency for the fingers to be a little bit heavy, like molasses, and linger into the notes too long. We want tight, quick motions. Imagine like you're playing like almost like Bach style music, where you want a kind of a swift gesture of the finger that's precise and flicking from one to the next, as opposed to a slower movement of the finger. Now again, it's really difficult to do this quietly because our habit tends to be to press with a fast attack and correspond that with loudness. But here, we're corresponding the fast attack with a soft volume. So that's one of the big challenges that I want you to keep your ear open for when you're performing and practicing this piece. The other one, as I've already mentioned, is not looking at your hands and allowing this to be a way to develop your muscle memory and your keyboard geography by feel without visually looking. I tried when I was performing to not look at my hands. I'm pretty sure my eyes would have flicked like a couple times, but for the most part, you're able to play this piece while looking ahead. So for example, if we look at the opening and just look at the way the left hand moves, we start outlining an E minor chord, and then our hand stays in place. We just switch to finger 4, don't have to move at all. But now we're inverting that E minor chord. Okay, so you might want to, as a warm-up for this piece, it would be really helpful to practice E minor triads broken like this, going through every inversion without looking. So you can do that one hand at a time. I don't think you need to do it with 2 hands, but you could. So I've got my eyes closed and I'm doing it by feel. Oh, definitely shakier on the way down, but that's a really nice exercise to get in the feel for what's going on. So we have our E minor inversion, and then again our hand gets to stay put. We just raise that pinky, and then we don't move the hand either. We just move to finger 4. Then we go down a step, then we go down a step, just wiggling the fingers in and out of place. Everything is in close access, even in the parts such as from measure 8 to 9 when we do a jump. The hand should still be able to fall into the right spot because it's not a huge leap. So challenge yourself to keep your eyes trained to the notes on the page without looking down. Ear players, this is going to be a very good sight reading exercise for you because you're going to be practicing that specific skill where you have to follow the notes and scroll through them your eyes trained to the page in the way that you're just not instinctually going to want to do. So it's really great practice for that. And for sight readers, this is good for you too, because it's attacking your muscle memory. Because even people who are pretty adept at sight reading tend to be in the habit of playing, looking, playing, looking, playing, looking. And this is one where we want to really try to look ahead 99% of the performance. So that's really the big thing to work on, and enjoying just some of the harmonic changes. Pay attention to, if you've got this written down in your music, there's that E minor tonic harmony. And when does it go to the dominant or the dominant seventh harmony? When does it resolve to the minor, back to the tonic, and so forth? Can you hear the moments where there's A minor chords thrown in there as well? Just kind of paying attention to the way that the tonic and dominant chords especially push and pull the feel of this piece. It gives us this constant sense of oscillation between tension and release. It's really cool. That's, again, just something a theory stuff to do right in your page, and then it's just sort of there. As your eyes are scrolling through the notes, you're going to passively perhaps, but you're still going to get that sensory data that's appearing on the page. You're still going to have this perception of there being tonic and dominant chords, even if you're not actively thinking about it. So that's kind of I think a useful thing to go through, a useful exercise to do. Anyway, that's the piece. One more thing I wanted to say about it, actually. This piece works really well with the walking method of speeding up a piece. As I talked about in a previous video with how to speed up a piece, it's best, I think, to start this one really slow. You might even want to start this one with a blank metronome tick that ticks for the triplets. So what I mean by that, I've got this just ticking at 120, where maybe we're going to treat every note of the triplet as if it's a quarter note. So then you can incrementally increase that, with the goal being eventually, maybe by the end of your first week with this piece, being able to play the whole thing around 60 beats per minute. Our goal is 84. So if we can do it at 60, we have to imagine that tick has 3 triplets nestled in it. So triplet, triplet, triplet. This is quite fast for a week 1. So it depends on how much time you're putting into it, but slowly shifting the way that you're using your metronome, starting from every note gets a tick, and then eventually around 60 beats per minute or so, shifting it over. That would be about once you get to about 180 beats per minute in quarter note ticks. You divide that by 3, then you can play at 60 beats per minute. And every couple of days, try to incrementally increase the tempo, so that over, let's say, about 3 weeks, this piece is really technically interesting, and there's a lot to learn from it, but it's not completely complicated. It's actually a fairly approachable etude, and if I was to give a star rating to it, 1 star being easy for the level and 5 stars being difficult, I'd give this one a 1 or 2. It's not crazy difficult. It's easy enough to wrap your head around, but there's a lot of things that make it really interesting and spicy to play. All right, so now it's your turn to start working on this piece. The sheet music is always linked on the blog post for each video, so you'll find the link for that below. You can download the MuseScore file or the PDF or both, and play around with them as you will. So hopefully you have fun with this one. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye, guys.